Assalamu alaikum. What I wanted to ask you was your name, where you're from, and your journey to Islam.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I am Jeanette Lamour, with the Islamic name of Hablullah. I was born May of 1948 in Topeka, Kansas. Born into Catholic couple, Catholic family, and lived in Topeka on and off between my birth and when I was 6 years old. At 6 years old, we permanently moved to New Jersey, which is where my mother is from, and I basically grew up in New Jersey. And all of my education was in Catholic schools except for kindergarten, when I went to Monroe Elementary School in Topeka, Kansas, which is now a historic national monument because it is the school that was involved in the decision that was made in 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, to desegregate public schools in America. And then, we grew up in Catholicism, very, I don't want to say fervent, but very particular about completing the rituals, the Wednesday night rosary, Saturday confession, Sunday morning mass every week, and annual Lent fasting and all of the rituals that went along with the Easter and whatever other holidays that were part of Catholicism. So I lived as a Catholic. I was married in the Catholic Church. My husband was not a Catholic, but we settled first in New Jersey on a small farm in Salem, which is south, and then we moved to a small city called Vineland, which, when I say small city, it's a small town to me, but actually in space, it's the largest city in New Jersey. So we moved there, and I was 11 years old when we moved there, and grew up there, and was there so I was born in 1948, and I like to say first half of the last century. That's when I was born. That sounds really neat. So first half of the last century. It was like 1959 when we moved to Vineland and settled there. And throughout all of my life, I can say we were either the only or one of two African-American families in the Catholic community that we were in. So in Vineland, there were no other brown Catholics. So we were the only African-American family, so there was no marriage choices for me. So I ended up marrying a non-Catholic man, and my first three children were born in Catholicism, baptized in the Catholic Church. But I think I started to feel a separation from the Catholic faith in high school. It's when I can remember feeling it, because I was in an all-girls Catholic high school, and the religion classes were taught by priests. The nuns, they decided nuns were not even qualified to teach religion. So our school was really small. There were only, when I started, maybe 60 girls in the whole school. And my sister and I were the only African Americans. And, but the priests, I remember one of the girls, and we had girl students from different places that came in from the shore, from the Atlantic shore, there was Ocean City, Long Beach, Sea City, Atlantic City, all the little small shore towns. They were coming in to this school. The bus went all the way there to pick them up. It was maybe 40 minutes, but one of these young, blonde beach girls asked the priest a question one day in class. And I don't remember the question, but I definitely remember his response. He was like, "Don't ask that." And I was like, what does he mean, don't ask that? Why can't we ask questions? Why won't he, answer us? So religion for us from elementary through high school was basically you read, you memorize, you repeat. And questions were only entertained up to a point, and I didn't like that. And I think the rituals started to become empty to me. So by the time I graduated, I'm married. I have 3 children because my second pregnancy was twins. So I had a daughter and then I had twins. And I started to feel that there was really no substance in that religion and nothing for me. And I kind of stopped going gradually. And probably I was in a crisis in my life just in general because my marriage wasn't very good either. But I stopped going to church and stopped participating in anything, the confession, the communions, the, whatever. I just stopped everything. And I had no religion for some time, but I was a spiritual person because I had been, real dedicated to the rituals, going to the mass. And even while I was in high school, of course, we had a chapel where we had our services while we were in school, and I would go to the chapel regularly and kneel down and pray and, light candles and do all that stuff. So now after I stopped going to church, I didn't have anything. And I had grown up with my grandmother, and she was the woman who adopted my mother, was a Jehovah's Witness. Other people were in the Baptist and whatever. I had been to different churches, and I knew I didn't want to go to any of the other Christian faiths, but I didn't know what I wanted, so I started reading Buddhism, Confucianism, started practicing yoga, just, kind of hanging without a definite seat for my soul. And remember, I'm talking Vineland, New Jersey, which is South Jersey, small town, like I say, big in area, but small. Largest ethnic group in that city were the Italians. In fact, on my block, we lived next door to an Italian on one side and an Irish person on the other. There were no African Americans in my neighborhood. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was just kind of floating, but still wanting something, so I kept searching. But it took some years before we even had any encounter with people who called themselves Muslims, because in my town, there was nobody. And when we met people, it wasn't even real Muslims, it was Nation of Islam. So so what happened, my mother was educated as a teacher, and she had a master's degree in special ed. So she was teaching, and one of the other teachers had a son who had gotten involved with Nation of Islam and who had invited my mom to some meetings. And so my mother was the first one to kind of take this move away from Catholicism to Nation of Islam. And then she was telling us about it, and we were laughing because we thought it was funny, just joking, we made a joke out of salam alaikum, whatever. It's like, these are things we never heard, we didn't know anything about it. And I don't know if it's just say now, but I'm going to say it, but now, so that was like, I would say maybe 69, 70, around 1970, and now that little town has a large Muslim population, has a masjid that was built from the ground up, has Islamic school. It's like amazing. But at that time, there was nothing. So this man who had invited my mom to go to a meeting of Nation of Islam was with a group from Camden, New Jersey. And anybody that knows anything about Camden, New Jersey, back in the day, and maybe still today, it was crime center of the United States of America. Okay. So, but anyway, so my mom started going to meetings that they were holding actually in Vineland in a little room somewhere, community hall or something. And she kept inviting us to go, and none of us wanted to go. But I had younger brother, and a younger sister who were still living at home, and they ended up, going with my mom because basically they were still under her control. And eventually my older sister and myself and one of my younger brothers, we started visiting. And I don't really know what drew my mother to that, what drew her to that away from Catholicism. For me, it was just, well, here's something different that I don't know about, that is supposed to be a spiritual path. Let me investigate this, let me, try this. And as I say today to anybody, you have to understand why that message of Nation of Islam was attractive to African American people in the United States, because they start talking about, you know, black superiority, you know, you are the original people, you are the best people, you know, and introducing Allah to you in a way. And we had Qur'ans, and we had some hadith and, you know, different things. But also what happened for me was that group of people from Camden and Philadelphia, because Philadelphia is right across the bridge from Camden, they were city slickers, and a lot of them, some of them were criminals and had bad backgrounds. I was a country bumpkin. I grew up in, you know, first really young years in Topeka, Kansas, which was, I don't know what it's like now, but was very, how do you say, casual and conservative and all of that. Then we went to a farm in Salem, New Jersey. So I spent some years living on a small farm out in the country. Again, no African Americans around us. All our neighbors were white farmers or European American farmers. So, and then I go into Vineland, into this mainly Italian town. The next population in Vineland were Jews. And then I get smack in the middle of some city slickers and real kind of, you know, what do you call it, neighborhood folks from Camden and Philadelphia. And so I don't know these kind of people. I know nothing, I've had no experience with this in my life, but I was still trying to be what I thought was a Muslim. What I didn't know, which I will introduce here, was that I had been a Muslim all my life. And this was not my journey to Islam, but my evolutional journey in Islam. I was still Muslim when I was a Catholic, still seeking closeness to Allah, but I would never have said Allah back then, seeking closeness to God, seeking communion, conversation with God, wanting to be acceptable to God. So I wasn't journeying to Islam, I was journeying in Islam, because as I hope most people know, Islam is the nature of the universe, and it's the nature of all beings in the universe. So we come into this physical world as Muslims. There's no other way to come into creation except as a Muslim. So, and then what happens, like it says, your parents may cause you to be something else, but your whole life is a journey in this existence of Islam. So now I'm going to a temple in Camden, New Jersey, and taking my young children up to this temple. And, you know, I didn't stay in it long, but while I was in it, I couldn't stay in it long, but I did get married, unfortunately, to someone that, you know, again, I didn't know these people. I didn't know people lied and put on fronts and acted differently than what they really were, but I found out very quickly. So I get married in that and spent some time up there. And there was good and there was bad. You know, it was very disciplined, very organized. You know, we dressed very modestly, and so I wouldn't wear my cutoffs anymore, and denim cutoffs and, you know, whatever, mini skirts. But we dressed very modestly, and we were introduced into something that was like community, so we felt like family, and we were, you know, doing things together. We were co-op purchasing together. We were studying together. We learned martial arts together. And my first martial arts teacher was Belinda Ali. Her name is not Belinda anymore, but that was Muhammad Ali's first wife, so she was my first martial arts teacher, and I've had others. And, you know, we had education, what was University of Islam. From preschool on, it was called University of Islam. And Muhammad Ali's younger children, Miriam and the twins, they were, because I started working up there, and they were in our classes, and had my children up there in those classes, because my oldest daughter was by then going on 5. She was almost kindergarten age. So there was discipline, there was communal work, but the people were crazy, okay? So I had to leave. One day we were sitting up there and in a meeting, and they had what they called holdback meetings. So visitors and people who were guests would leave, but the people who were actually in the Nation of Islam, who had gotten their X, taking away your slave name, get your X, and all, we were supposed to stay. And the talk was so crazy, I remember looking around and trying to see if anybody else was as disturbed as I was, and I didn't see, and I had a baby then. And I got up and I said, I've got to get out of here. And I went downstairs, and we had, people on post, like brothers, sisters, whatever, on post. But there was a brother at the door, and he said, oh, the minister said nobody can leave. And I said, oh, no, he said we could leave if we wanted to. It was okay for us to go. He said, oh, you did? I said, yes. And so he moved and let me out the door, because if he hadn't moved and let me out the door, I was thinking, I'm going to break this, I'm going to kick through this glass, and I'm getting out of here. So,
what was he talking about?
I don't remember what he was talking about, but I do know that by that time I had learned that some of them were engaged in voodoo, black magic type stuff. Some of them were engaged in immoral behavior. In fact, my younger sister got caught up in some of that and got physically beat. When the man is the one who should have got beat, she was a teenager and he was an adult. And he was married. And he got involved with my sister, and she got, there was a line. She had to walk this line, and everybody was like whipping her, hitting her, beating her with either straps or their hands. And yeah, so anyway, I was like, I gotta get out of here, I gotta get away from this. And I never went back. When I left that day, I never went back. I think that must have been around 73. So I only got in it, like, I would say 1971, so I was only in there for 2 years, but it was like just enough to devastate me. So I walked away from that, and then it's like, where do I go now? It's like, but by 1975, which is when Imam al-Warthaddin took over the leadership after his father Elijah passed. And so then, I was still kind of loosely following what was going on. So when I heard him talking, I was like, oh, okay, I think I can go back now and begin to participate. So I did, and it was, different. But 1977, I moved from New Jersey out to Kansas City. And so actually it was in 1975 when I changed my name. And also in 75, I had started attending Rutgers University, because I didn't do my university before because I had got pregnant and had babies. And so in 75, I went to Rutgers, and I had already changed my name when I went into the university. So then I was Jeanette Hablullah. And moved to Kansas City and started with the group of African Americans who were following Warthaddin. But I was studying at the University of Missouri and also working at the University of Missouri. So I met Muslims there who invited me to attend Jummah and some of the Sunday Ta'aleem type things at this place where they were meeting in Kansas. And I started doing that, and I liked them. They were international, from like Kashmir, Palestine, Yemen, different places. And that was my first exposure to international Muslims. Before that I only knew African Americans who were calling themselves Muslims. But, so I liked that, and so I began to attend their gatherings more than the others, and I began to spend more time with them. And then they built a masjid, and I ended up, being with them and became a teacher in their weekend school, and I loved it. That was my family, and that's what I call my real birthplace and my real home of Islam is Kansas City, Missouri, with that group, because we were like a real family. We shared meals together. Sometimes the brothers cooked for the women. Sometimes, most of the time we were cooking for them. Sometimes we both shared. They brought in an imam from, they used to have one brother who came over from Pakistan every Ramadan who would lead the Tarawih prayers and give talks. But then they actually hired an imam he was from Sudan, but he had gone to school in Saudi Arabia, and he began, teaching a lot, and so I was attending a lot of his classes. So that was really my full development in Islam, was Kansas City.